The Lives of the Brethren, Part 3. A brother who had very carefully prepared his sermon, on the spur of the moment changed his subject and spoke on quite a new topic, and by Our Lady's help acquitted himself better than if he had expressly prepared it. The same Cistercian was present, and told us he saw the Blessed Virgin standing before the preacher and holding an open book during the whole sermon time, and the preacher seemed to the monk and to the people present to speak better and with greater profit to souls, and far more fervently than he had done for a long time back. A religious who had been chosen prior of a priory in Tuscany and confirmed in his office sought by every means to escape the burden. So at last he slipped away and wandered from place to place, like another Jonas, before the face of the Lord. He chanced to come across this same brother James, the Cistercian, who, besides, was a friend of his, and laying open his trouble of mind, entreated him to pray to Christ and to the Virgin Mother for him. As the monk was praying earnestly for this intention, that same night he beheld, as he afterwards testified, the Blessed Virgin prepared to set out on a journey to the place where the brother had been chosen prior. When the monk asked whither she was going, she made this reply: "I am going to take care of those religious who are without a prior." This being told the brother, he consented to accept the priorship. While the same monk was watching in prayer one night by the window of Cardinal Rayner's palace in Viterbo, which looked out upon the convent of the friar's preacher, he saw a white-robed procession wending its way along from outside the town to the friar's place, and he could distinctly note the forms of those in the procession and hear their voices. There was, moreover, among them one venerable figure distinct from all the rest, to whom all paid reverence as to their mistress. When they reached the place, a seat was set where now our choir is. Then there came up another figure with torn garments and disheveled hair, who threw herself at the other's feet, crying, "Avenge me, lady, of mine enemies." Then the first rejoined, "Why dost thou ask this of me? Soon shalt thou see a rare and almost unheard of chastisement overtake them." At this point the vision ended. Very soon after there took place that miserable capture of bishops at Pisa, nor can there be any doubt that it was the Church personified, thus making an entreaty to our Blessed Lady against the injuries and enmities of many bishops and doctors directed against the order. A young religious of the convent of Orvieto, a man of blameless life and beloved of his brethren, fell sick of the malady whereof he died. After having had the last rites, he was lying one morning in the infirmary, under another's care, while the rest were at Mass, when presently he began to gaze with fixed and distended eyes towards one spot. The brother in charge, deeming that he saw some unusual sight, as was the case, said coaxingly to him, "Brother Simon, for God's sake tell me what you're looking at, so that if it be good I may rejoice with you, but if not, that I may help you." The sick man answered never a word, but signed with his hand for him to be quiet. When the other again and again begged him to say what he saw, the sick man broke out into a wail of despair. "All that I have ever done in the order is lost." The terrified brother tried to soothe him as best as he could with words of hope, believing him possessed of a devil, telling him not to believe a word said by one who is a notorious liar and the father of lies. With a shake of his head, the sick man cried out, all are in hell, popes, cardinals, friars, preachers, and minors, Jeremites, and the whole body of them. For so the devil made him believe. Then the brother, as a last resource against despair, begged him to pray to the Blessed Virgin for help, almost forcing him to say the verse, Mater Maria gratiae, Mater misericordiae, tu nos ab hosta protege, et horror mortis suscipe. Strange to say, hardly the words were out before he cried joyously, "Did you not see the ever-watchful Virgin, our protectress, hurl into headlong flight the pack of devils who were here?" At the brother's request he now said the Te Deum, and on the return of the brethren, very humbly and sincerely confessed his despair, falling asleep in the Lord very soon after. He who faithfully wrote this account heard it from the brother in charge at the time, and many more brethren throughout Tuscany knew of it. A lay brother called Lantron, of the same convent, whom the brethren held in high repute for holiness, and who was especially noted for never spending an idle moment, while lying awake in the infirmary during his last sickness, most clearly saw the Blessed Virgin, Our Lady, enter in company with some young maidens, bearing towels and basins for washing. As she drew near, he who saw the vision asked her what she would do. "I am come," she said, "to cleanse the brethren from the infamy now attaching to them in the town." There had been an apostate who, with great malice, had so slandered them by word and by nearly 60 letters scattered all over the town and diocese, amongst them some who were jealous of our good brethren were doing, that they could scarcely hold their heads up for shame and grief. The sick brother, then, in a vision, saw her cleanse him and all the brethren. He who put all this down in writing testified that very shortly afterwards that great disgrace was wiped out, for the miserable apostate, being thrown into prison, owned that he had maliciously invented the whole falsehood. In the convent of Puy, in the town of Provence, Brother Peter, being near his end, began to cry out the most fervent greetings to the Blessed Virgin, at the same time saluting her with inclinations of the head and clasping his hands. When those who stood by asked, "Why do you behave in this way, brother?" the sick man replied, "What? See you not Our Lady, who in her bounty has come to visit me?" And so saying, he departed peacefully. A brother of the convent of Montpellier, named Leo, being visited on his deathbed by a very dear brother of his, told this to him: "Last night I had a beauteous vision, for I saw the Blessed Virgin, our glorious Mother, come to me and ask, 'Wilt thou come away with us?' 'Who art thou, Lady?' I said. Then she replied, 'I am the Mother of God.' 'I cannot believe thee to be the Mother of God,' was my reply, 'for I am a most vile sinner, and it is not befitting to so great a lady to come and visit me.' Again she insisted, 'I am the Mother of God.' And again I made the same remark. when at last she said to me, "Have no fear, my son, for I am indeed Christ's mother." I rejoiced. "If thou art the mother of God, I will most willingly go with thee." The brother died that very day about vesper time. That devout and gifted preacher, Brother Henry of Germany, recounted in a public sermon in Paris how a brother of our order, who was a man of blameless life and very devout to Mary, being come to the hour of his death, was so exceedingly glad that his whole countenance was radiant. Brother Henry, observing his exceeding joy, made this remark: "I wonder at seeing you welcome death so joyously, since everyone meets it with a natural dread." To which he replied, "I have kept up in the order my old college custom of making a daily memory of St. Nicholas and St. Catherine in matins and vespers. One night of late, St. Catherine seemed to lead me to a most lovely spot and said, 'This is my rest forever and ever.' And while I was lost in admiration of it, St. Nicholas came and took me to a still more heavenly place, and he said, too, 'This is my rest forever and ever.' As I stood, fairly amazed at the sight, the Blessed Virgin joined us and led me away to the most beautiful spot imaginable, and she said to me, 'This is my place of rest forever and ever.' Then said I, 'But, Lady, I have never deserved to dwell here.' 'Nay,' said she, 'for I have prepared this place on purpose for thee and thy brethren, the friars preacher.' 'But I am no preacher,' said I, 'although I wear the habit of one.' Then Our Lady made answer, 'This is your place, since it is reserved for your brethren of your order. Come and take possession of it.' 'On this account,' said the dying man, 'I look forward to my death with joy, and am all eagerness to hasten away to the place prepared and shown me by the Queen of Heaven.' Well might that dying brother address our Blessed Lady in the words of the patriarch Jacob, 'Now I can die content, since I have seen thy face.'" When the Roman court was removed to Naples on the death of the Emperor Frederick II and of his son Conrad, certain prelates so embittered the mind of the reigning pontiff against the mendicant friars of our order, that in 6 cases brought before him he gave judgment each time against the friars, and to the hurt of their manner of life. As his heart was not to be moved by arguments or entreaties, nor was he to be turned aside from his purpose, when the papal letters had been officially read and were on the eve of being dispatched throughout the world, our brethren at the court, of whom I was one, were in terrible straits and trouble. One of us, who had safely brought other difficult matters to a happy issue, was at his wit's end to know what to do. One day, while the brethren were at dinner, this man went to his usual refuge in all distress, the glorious Virgin, and on his knees before her altar and image, prayed for the order with many tears and a deep grief of soul, beseeching her to come to our aid in such dire distress. Then that special patroness of the order made the reply and said, "Within this very hour your order shall be set free." and anon the tidings came to the convent that it was indeed saved from its grave peril. A brother of long standing in the order, a devout and praiseworthy man, saw one night, most distinctly, our Blessed Lady come with two maidens to the dormitory door while the brethren were saying the matins of her office, and heard her greet them with the salutation, "Take courage, courage, ye brave men." This he both saw and heard as surely as anything can be seen or heard. He told it to the sub-prior in the prior's absence, that he might exhort the brethren to be still more devout in their homage to Our Lady, especially in reciting her office fervently and reverently. And this the sub-prior did rightly willingly. A novice, who was very devout to Our Lady and a faithful lover of observance, while praying fervently one night after matins, fell into a light sleep at his prayers. It then seemed to him as if a lady of great beauty stood by his side and put her hands on his shoulders. Seeing that it was a woman, he called out in alarm, "My God, how can women have got in here at this time of night?" But she soothed him by telling him in a gentle voice who she was, and inviting him to say with her the little hours of the Blessed Virgin's office. He agreed, and began the Ave Maria, while she answered throughout. She seemed to recite her part so sweetly and gently that his heart was stirred wonderfully, more especially as she repeated the versicles after each chapter. As she said the versicle of Nun, "Elegit iam Deus," the Lord hath chosen her, the tones sounded with such heavenly melody in the novice's ears that his whole heart melted and was wrapped in God. She disappeared, and he woke to find himself radiant with a joy he could not control. While preparing to serve as acolyte that morning, the same joy shone so brightly on his countenance that a fellow novice rebuked him for it, and as he could not contain himself for gladness, the others served Mass in his stead. As this gaiety was an unusual thing with him, his companion questioned him thereon, and after a long time drew out of him the secret of what he had seen, under strict promise of not letting it be known, and that joy lasted for a considerable time. Learn now from these examples what special care the Blessed Virgin takes of the brethren of our order, while they are preaching, on their journeys, at their work, in sickness and death, at their meals, in their griefs and trials, and at their prayers. Chapter 6. The origin of the Salve Regina, sung after Compline. The Virgin Mother of all, love both, cherishes with a special affection, and watches over this order which she has founded, while the devil, who is jealous of everything that is good, and who hesitated not to tempt the Lord of all, assailed our brethren in Bologna and Paris. As superiors bore witness, he threatened one with a burning furnace, which seemed to fall upon him, and he would suddenly embrace another under the guise of a woman. To this one he appeared like an ass with horns, and to another he offered fiery serpents. Others he abused with scurrilous words, so much that at last some of the brethren had to keep guard while the rest slept. Some lost their reasons, others were horribly tormented. Having recourse to their singular protectress, Mary Most Holy, they made it a rule to have a solemn procession after Compline, while singing the Salve Regina with its proper prayer. At once the phantoms were put to flight. Those who had been tormented were left in peace. 2 who had gone mad were restored to their wits. One of them in Paris was a son to a king. And from that time all went well with them. How pleasing their procession was to God and his Holy Mother was shown by the piety of the people, the way they thronged to our churches, the devotion of the clergy who came to assist at it, the tears and sighs of devotion, and the visions accorded. Many persons testified to this fact, that when the brethren were approaching the Lady Altar, they saw her and a throng of heavenly citizens come down from on high. As the words, "O sweet Virgin Mary," were sung, she bowed to them in turn, and gave them her blessing. After this, as they returned to choir, she went back to heaven. A holy and honest woman dwelling in Marseille, but a Lombard by race, who loved God and our order well, one evening was caught up in ecstasy in the church during the singing of the Salve, and saw 4 things deserving of being ever remembered and prized. She observed the Queen of Mercy perform 4 actions in keeping with the 4 sentiments of the antiphon. First of all, as the brethren sang the words, "Our life, our sweetness, and our hope," she saw the Blessed Virgin graciously return their salutation. As the anthem continued, at the words, "Turn then, O gracious Advocate," she observed her fall on her knees before her Son to make intercession for them. At the phrase, "Thine eyes of mercy towards us," she looked at them with a most gracious and happy smile. Lastly, as they sang, "After this our exile, show unto us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus, O clement, O holy, O sweet Virgin Mary," she saw her clasp her Son as a child, and hold him out to each in turn. The woman remained in this rapture until the signal was given at the end of Compline, and afterwards privately told it, with many tears, to her confessor, who was a very prudent man. The same holy person, during the time that the bishop was holding an ordination in Marseille, saw the Holy Spirit come down on all those who were being ordained, with the exception of a secular clerk. Brother Jordan, of blessed memory, the second Master General of the Order, wrote in his history of the foundation of the Order how a holy and trustworthy man told him that while the Salve was being sung, he often saw the Blessed Virgin Mary cast herself at her Son's feet and pray for the preservation of the Order. In the country of Avignon, close by the Rhone, stands the stately chateau of Tarascone, where Martha, who was Christ's hostess, rests. The present revelation was made known to the mother of the Sieur Alphonse, a lady most devoted to God and the Order, and it was witnessed to by Fulk, who afterwards became in turn Bishop of Puy, Archbishop of Narbonne, Cardinal Bishop of Sabina, and finally, Pope, under the name of Clement IV. The following letter is from his own hand. To the religious brethren, the friars preacher of Montpellier, Guy Fawkes sends greetings and peace. As the feast of last Pentecost was approaching, when your general chapter was to be held, my sister, the Lady of Tarascone, being very desirous of seeing so famous and joyful a gathering of friends of God, went down 15 days before to stay among her friends and acquaintances at St. Gilles. When any of her gossips called upon her, and they were all of them highly edified by her behavior, she used to ask them as often as they said the Lord's Prayer they would likewise salute his Holy Mother, to the end that he might send down the Holy Ghost upon the brethren who were going to meet in the chapter, and that the Mother of Mercy might bestow her best favors upon them. Hers was assuredly a praiseworthy devotion, for her thought was the more commendable in not resting content with just providing for their temporal needs, but begging even for spiritual alms, deeming it hardly possible for God not to hearken to prayer, since he, who is faithful to all his promises, binds himself to hear the entreaties of his devoted servants. Coming to Montpellier with her sister, while the divine offices were being performed on that festival in your church, she cast herself prostrate upon the ground in prayer and began very fervently to entreat the Lord to look graciously upon so many brethren met together in his name, some of whom had either labored or were laboring in distant quarters of the globe, and to deign to enlighten them with his Holy Spirit, so that if any were lacking in merits, he might make it good in his mercy. While turning all this over in her mind and praying heartily, the cantors intoned the hymn Veni Creator Spiritus, and directed she saw a sheet of fire come down from heaven which enveloped all the choir and brethren until the hymn was ended. This she beheld with great joy, and without saying a word about it to anyone, or ascribing it any merits of her own, she gave thanks to God, who lavishes his bountiful gifts upon the preachers of our time, as on the first fishers of men. That same evening she returned for Compline, and while the brethren were singing that sweet anthem, the Salve Regina, the Queen of Heaven stood visibly before her, and cautioned her not to quit her side. She then saw her pass up the choir and bow on either side to the brethren as they sang, and take her stand close by the acolytes until the prayer was finished, after which she went back to heaven, drawing her up in desire. On regaining her senses, she was overcome with the taste of such sweetness, gave humble thanks to God, and turned over the whole matter in her own mind. For 3 successive days she had exactly the same vision at Compline time, but, like a wise and silent woman, never breathed a word about it to her sister nor to anyone at all, until, being laid low with a severe sickness, and feeling the hand of death upon her, she decided that she had long desired. She told the story first of all to me, then to her sister and her son, and afterwards to your prior of Arles, and to 3 of your brethren. After this she died, and we laid her to rest in your brethren's cemetery at Arles, for at that time they had no convent in Tarascone. A brother of the English province fell so seriously ill after matins that he almost died, and during all the next day he felt the same pains in his heart, but did not on that account absent himself from the compline. And while the rest were singing the Salve, he joined in as well as he could, and fearing a repetition of what had suffered the night before, he entreated and the Blessed Virgin to have compassion upon him. "If thou art the Queen of Mercy," said he, "let me experience thy pity now." As he said the words, he felt caught up in spirit, and saw the Blessed Virgin approaching him, carrying her son, all blood-stained, as if he had been slain but that very hour. "You will never suffer as much for the love of him as he has endured for you," were her words, saying which she clasped Christ to her bosom and passed from sight. The brother felt himself cured on the instant from all his pains, and after giving thanks to God, wrote an account of the matter privately to the master of the order. While a terrible storm of thunder and hail was raging around the sisters' convent at Pruille, the terrified nuns ran to the choir and sang the Salve Regina most devoutly, beseeching the Mother of Mercy of her clemency to protect them and their lands, on which they depended for support. And now a great wonder was wrought by him who commandeth the winds, and turneth the lightnings into rains. For whereas in all the country round the harvest and vines were beaten flat to the ground and destroyed utterly, all the sisters' possessions were, by God's favor and Mary's protection, kept safe and untouched. Brother Sayer, a professor of Cambridge University, who was renowned for piety and learning, reported to us how a certain holy man used often to behold a globe of light come down from heaven and rest upon the heads of the brethren while they were devoutly singing Blessed Mary's anthem after Compline.